Hello, fans of Cheese of Ages, and anyone else watching. This is my review of the Amazing Spiderman motion picture, as you can tell from up there if you can read. Anyway, unfortunately, the Amazing Spiderman wasn't all that amazing. I'll admit I didn't see the entirety of the movie. I had to go to the bathroom once, so I missed a scene. But, even including that, amounting to what little scene I missed, I wasn't gone that long. Even I'm factoring in that I did not see at least one or two scenes. It wasn't that amazing. So let's go ahead and hit off first with the number of score. I'd rate it 6 out of 10. Above average, but not amazing, to push that joke too hard. How would it compare to the first of the Raimi movies, or all of the Raimi movies in general? Well, it was about equal quality with the first Raimi movie. Both did some things better than the other did not do as good, and it works both ways in that regard. In some ways it's better than 2, but in most regards Spider-Man 2 was better than The Amazing Spider-Man. And I don't even think I need to tell you that that Spider-Man 3 is just the worst of all three of the Raimi movies, and doesn't even come close to the quality that Amazing Spider-Man achieved. 6 out of 10 for The Amazing Spider-Man. Not amazing. Why? And what did the Raimi movie, first Spider-Man movie, do well that this one didn't? Well, one, it's more of a personal nitpick, but I would prefer if the entire cast was unknown. Unknown actors. But right there, somewhat conspicuous, at least for me, and the roles of Aunt May and Uncle Ben are Sally Field and Martin Sheen. Me personally, in superhero origin movies, I want my actors to not be very well known. For instance, in the Raimi movies, Tobey Maguire and James DeFranco weren't like movie megastars by any means of the imagination. They were experienced actors that had been in a lot of movies, but they weren't really people you recognize. The large majority of us would recognize, like, oh man, that's Tobey Maguire, or that's James DeFranco. You've seen him in a couple of movies, but you really don't associate him with anything. And forgive me, I can't recall the name of the woman that played Aunt May in the Raimi movies, but she was an impeccable Aunt May, and is a famous theater actress, but had been in very few films. Most of the cast of the Raimi movie, the first one, were relative unknowns, and that's how I personally feel it should be with origin superhero movies. It should be relative unknowns. While some of the cast was relative unknowns, like James Garfield, and most of the actors I didn't recognize from things. I'm pretty sure I've seen the Gwen Stacy actress, whoever it was. Let me check. Emma Stone. I'm pretty sure Emma Stone's been in a lot of movies. But most of the cast was relative unknowns. It's just they had those two really well-known ones. I mean, Sally Field was in everything back in the early 90s. And Martin Sheen, it's Martin Sheen. It's not that they did a bad job, although Sally Field in this movie might as well have been any other parental figure in the existence of movie kind. She wasn't really Aunt May. She was just a mother figure, and actually barely in the movie at all. And that's one of the more major problems. Very little development of a lot of the characters. And that's a hard achievement, as pretty much nobody in the entire movie had any real development to them. And when one of those characters that I'm including that got actually very little development of substance is the main character and is on the screen 98% of the time, there's something wrong with your script. I mean, sure, Peter Parker got reasonably well established. It's like, oh, here's Peter Parker, and he's a nerd, and he skateboards, and he becomes Spider-Man, and it does carry on those deep elements of, Spider-Man wisecracks, and he wisecracks because he's acting out on his like repressed feelings from being bullied in high school. That was a nice little thing, and that was pretty well developed, but it's kind of disjointed in its pacing, and that basically derails any sense of character development throughout. And some scenes just seem kind of slammed in there and sloppily executed. Basically what I'm trying to say is the movie would have significantly benefited from a couple extra minutes on some of the scenes, and a little bit better scene transition, a couple extra scenes. I would rarely say this about a movie, and a lot of people would probably never say this about a movie. The movie wasn't long enough. They were trying to do a lot of stuff, and it's very clear that a lot was cut, and very little actual development up here was in the movie. Plot lines went nowhere or were dropped off to leave for future movies when they should have been fleshed out a little bit more in this movie. Kurt Connors, for instance, he's just basically, oh, I'm a scientist doing this, and I'm related to your father. And, we talk this on this one occasion because you're freaking out because you might think you might die from the spider bite that gave you your superpowers, and I don't know about your superpowers yet. And then I become the lizard after might be thrown out of my project, and then I totally derail my entire character and become a villain with no actual scenes of transition between reasonably nice scientisty guy to psychotic rampaging megalomaniac. I mean, the change is like jarring. Feels like there's an entire missing scene where he's having an argument with the lizard in his brain. I mean, there is a scene where the lizard is like, nah, I'm malicious, and you need the power, and you like the power, and everybody should have this power. Humans are, bad and like not complete. But he doesn't argue with it at all. It's just basically, it's like you're in his head for no reason. You're hearing what's going on in his brain. It doesn't really come off as a, oh, I'm going insane tick, because he's already clearly insane at this point. It's poorly placed, as he's clearly gone off his rocker already at this point, and they show a scene of him going off his rocker. It's iffily placed. A lot of scenes are iffily placed in the order, so they seem anyway like they're out of order or something. For instance, as other reviews have stated, Uncle Ben calls Peter to say, oh, why didn't you pick up your aunt? You needed to pick up your aunt, like I said. But that's not the message that's said. It's basically, the power and responsibility speech. When easily, that scene could have been moved like 5 minutes further along into the movie in a scene where Peter gets angry at Uncle Ben and runs out of the house, and Uncle Ben goes after him. I won't spoil the scene for you, but basically that speech could have been made when he's trying to contact Peter and get him to come home after he's run off. The speech sounds like it was meant for that scene, but it was put in the wrong spot. You don't give somebody a power and responsibility speech when you're reminding them to pick up their aunt at wherever she was. It's not established where she actually was or what she needed to be picked up from. Which is another thing about the missing scenes. Aunt May is basically not in the movie. You give it to a big name like Sally Field, that, well, used to be a big name and mostly did TV recently, but you give it to like Sally Field, and she's a capable actress in the scene she is, although she isn't really all that Aunt May-ish, and you give her nothing to work with. You don't give her any scenes to actually establish her as an Aunt May-ish kind of figure. She and Peter almost never interact in the movie, and for the Uncle Ben is like gone so fast we actually can't establish any sort of emotional link there. I would like to see the pacing stretched out a little bit more. While the origin should take up a little bit more of the movie. If you're going to make an origin movie, don't do the origin in like freaking 45 minutes that actually seems like 5 because of really weird pacing, and then throw a whole bunch of other crap into the movie including a rushed and somewhat teeny bopper sub-romance plot that it goes way too fast and doesn't progress naturally, and clog that up more with a villain progression that needed far more development for the substance you were trying to give it. And you just basically give your put on your table a disheveled mess. And while I actually don't really like the Raimi movies that much, the first Raimi movie is actually all around more solid and pacing wise. Although the second part of the movie is a bit disjointed, the overall pacing is a lot better. At least in my personal opinion. I still don't like the original Raimi movies because, the second half of the first one is kind of hokey, and too campy, even for like Spider-Man, who's supposed to be a bit, serious mixed with quippy, and the whole package deal of the Green Goblin gets kind of over the top, but I get a feeling if basically they had mashed the Raimi Spider-Man 1 movie with the Amazing Spider-Man, it would have been perfect. Raimi should not have directed the Spider-Man trilogy by a long shot. And it's clear from how he handled 3. Spider-Man 3, Venom was shoehorned in there. It's like, oh, the fans want him. I don't want to put him in the movie, so I'll shoehorn him in here and get him out of the way so I don't have to deal with him anymore. As a director, your key mistake when you're making movies is to let your personal feelings and your anger at something, or basically your dislike of something, get in your way. You don't. When you're a director, you have this vision, and sure, it's okay to go for that vision, but when you're going with a licensed movie like Spider-Man or Batman, your emotions are not the key factor. What you're aiming for is to present something that fans will like and is true to the source material while telling and bringing a new depth to it. That's what a licensed movie should be. Raimi was just making the movie he wanted to make, and when the fans wanted some more stuff to get up in there, and like, I want to see Venom, and he doesn't like Venom, and he likes Sandman, so he just like throws it in there and makes a freaking movie that's crap. It's also what made the first Twilight movie terrible. I know a lot of Twilight fans that would say the first Twilight movie was terrible. And me personally, feel free to hate me as you like, I actually enjoyed the first Twilight book for what it was. For like a teeny romance novel, it was actually well done. And aside from the shiny vampires thing, if you can put that aside, it was, it introduced an interesting, somewhat interesting universe. But did that go well in the movie? No. I know books are hard to adapt because books have a lot more depth and space to work with, while movies got to fit in a little time period and can't portray every single dimension of everything. But the movie was so shallow and so freaking squee, if you know what a squee is. Basically, a squeal of, glee, often attributed to fangirls. And that's because the people who were funding the movie made the mistake of putting a director in charge of the project that was a fangirl for the source material. You don't want to do that when you're trying to make a movie, and put a director in place that will let their emotions control them too much. While it's okay to feel passion for the project, you got to keep it in check, you got to keep it focused, and you've got to put out a movie of a certain caliber. You can't let your emotions influence any of your decisions to a detrimental degree. You can oh, hang on, Spider Monkey, or oh my God, fan service squee, or stuff like that. You can't oh, well, the fans want this, but I don't, so let's shoehorn it in there and get it out the way. You can't let your emotions conflict with what the target audience wants. Now this is just me. I'm like not a famous director or a film student or anything. It's just me from a creator's perspective, because I write a hell of a ton. I've never directed anything, and heck, my YouTube channel isn't all that popular, but I'm just doing this from an outsider's perspective of direction, and I'm sure a lot of experts would, at least some would agree with the points I'm trying to make about that, about drawing a line between your emotions and the needs of the project. But, still putting some of you in it without, it being about you, your wants. There's the line that has to be drawn, you know what I mean. Yeah, anyway, all in all, Amazing Spider-Man, solid 6 out of 10. It was a good movie. Something I'd probably see again once it came out on DVD. I'd probably get the DVD, especially if they added deleted scenes. But this is definitely a movie I would recommend you don't bother seeing in the theaters and just get the DVD. Definitely get the DVD, but don't bother seeing it in movies if you haven't already. It doesn't have enough substance to warrant the ticket. Hopefully there will be more like a director's cut or something that like has the full complete movie in there, has extra scenes, but there's so little substance to it. There's the clear show of love for the source material and trying to give the fans the movie they want, but the pacing is shoddy, and because they're just trying to do so much and not fully fleshing it out because they've got no room. And heck, I like all of the characters. While I didn't get, much of a emotional connection to Aunt May and Uncle Ben, they did a good job, and I was fond of Uncle Ben a little. Aunt May, I didn't have really any connection to at all because she was only in the movie for about a total of 6 minutes. I liked Gwen Stacy. I kind of liked Peter Parker. He could grow on me, which that says something if he's been in the movie 98% of the time, and I still haven't really formed much of a connection with him. Kurt Connors, how poorly he was developed, I kind of formed a bit of a link there. All in all, it all boils down to there wasn't enough freaking substance for the depth they were going for. And that's about it. And I mentioned before in passing that the romance subplot's not as fleshed out as it should be and goes too fast. Basically, it amounts from, Gwen let's talk about this from the female's perspective in this little love tryst. Well, not tryst, poor choice of words, but, little love affair thing. Gwen sees Peter Parker, knows of him because he's like they've been apparently competing for top score for a while in the class, so she knows of him but doesn't really interact with him all that much. And she sees him near the start of the movie save another geek from being persecuted, but then get his ass beat. She steps in, saves him by deflecting Flash Thompson, and, that was cool of you, Peter, saving that guy like that, even though you got your ass kicked. That was cool. And it's sincerely, that was cool, because it was a cool thing to do. And then later, he tries to ask her out and fuddles through it, and she thinks it's kind of cute. And, he kind of sneaks into the lab she's working at, and insists it's because he likes science, so he comes off as weird. And then, basically later, his uncle's died, and, she consoles him, and then invites him over for dinner to her house, and what should be like, let's, be more friendly, and, you're having hard times, come over to my house, kind of thing. That's what it's written as. And then suddenly, their romance advances like 3 steps, in which she's suddenly freaking in love with him, and making out intensely on the balcony during a family dinner, and then, when she finds out he's Spider-Man, right then, she's, cool with it. Well, that actually would make sense in this progression. If, she likes him, it's fine, he's Spider-Man, and, yada yada. That's natural, but that's a bit jarring to go from, budding romance to, we're freakishly in love at that point. And then after that jarring advancement, that's clearly there's a missing scene here. There needs to be another scene there or something. We go on progressing with the rest of the movie, where he gets wounded later and comes to her apartment, and she tends his wounds, and it's like, I can't really handle this because, I have spent my entire life wondering if my policeman father would be coming home every night, and now you're a superhero. I don't know if I can handle this. And like, no, we can work this out. Let's get out of here. I'll swing around, even though I'm horribly wounded. I'll take you around in a sort of Spider-Man, not Spider-Man, a Spider-Man version of the superhero, Superman from the first movie scene where they're like flying together, kind of thing, which is basically just a swing, and the scene ends. And for the rest of the movie, they're like doing the natural progression of things, and it's paced okay from that point. The main issue with the romance plotline is that jarring cut that I mentioned, where from like budding like, I have a crush on you, and you're nice, a sweet little nerdy guy I like, and I want to develop a romance with, to suddenly passionately in love. It's weird. Oh, and a quick final review before I cut this and sign off. The Amazing Spider-Man video game is quite possibly the best licensed video game I have ever played. Well, best movie licensed video game. While it's somewhat repetitive and can be somewhat easy on the lower difficulties in the normal difficulty setting, storyline-wise and complete package-wise, it's the best movie licensed game I've pretty much ever played. In fact, the storyline is actually better than the movie. And actually, does a lot more and fleshes things out that should have been fleshed out. So yeah, get the movie on DVD and play the video game. Or go see the movie in theaters if you're a Spider-Man fan. I wouldn't really recommend wasting the money, though. Mind you, the Amazing Spider-Man video game isn't as good as the Arkham City and Arkham Asylum games. But those aren't movie license games. But anyway, this is Shoes of Ages, awkwardly signing off. The wrong hand salute.